Welcome to Inner Peace Better Health, where we explore the deep connection between how we think and how we lead and how we live. I am Nazish, and today's conversation is especially for anyone who has ever felt overlooked, overwhelmed, or quietly burdened while trying to lead the right way. I am joined by Sira Laurel, a founder of North of Normal and dual certified coach who helps sensitive and neurodivergent professionals lead powerfully, but by understanding how their brain actually works. Today, we are talking about how to lead with the brain in mind and why that may be the missing piece so many leaders are searching for. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thank you so much for having me.
Wonderful. So, when you were in deep with your HR leadership career, what first signaled to you that the way you were leading brain wasn't sustainable for yourself?
Sure. I suppose I had a lot of early warning signs that frankly it as the fixer, the person to solve the problems. And I entered into businesses with CEOs who had a particular expectation of the way that staff should be working. And that typically meant always on, non emotional, to have that kind of stoic executive presence at all times. And I think the irony of my situation is that, despite knowing that am a highly sensitive person and theoretically knowing, what that meant in terms of my nervous system needs, I still attempted to meet everyone else's needs before my own. And I finally, after 15 years, burned out. And so there were a lot of small, again, early warning signals that I ignored over a long enough period of time that it was finally, a loud signal that came my way and forced me to make a change.
You know, that moment of realization when your body and your mind finally says this isn't working is something so many leaders quietly experience.
Absolutely.
So, a lot of leadership advice seems built around being louder, faster, and more assertive. What is the biggest misconception you see about good leadership is supposed to look like?
Yes. Some of the biggest misconceptions are that everyone processes the same way, that everyone experiences sensory input, right? Experiences what's happening in their environment, the events in the same way, and that we need, the same amount of recover time, that we recharge in the same way, and that we can make decisions at the same pace, which is not true at all. But this is what traditional leadership is built around. Instead, right, and what we've been told, right, of some of that old language around needing to develop a thicker skin or to stop overthinking, that you're too emotional or too sensitive. I mean, even, terms I think of like manning up, right? That type of framing. The reality, right, of these highly sensitive nervous systems is that we can prevent conflicts by sensing the friction in a system before others. That by taking in a larger amount of information consciously, we're able to prevent costly reversals, prevent mistakes, or see again the opportunity or the threat, the risk that someone else may have missed. So we're providing sophisticated processing that in the age of AI and automation, which are removing routine and repeatable tasks, we are left with the very complex types of problems needing to be solved. And that requires conscious leadership and deep processing, the things that highly sensitive people have in droves.
Mm. That brings such a perspective to this conversation. And so instead of um I believe that instead of leadership being about force or performance, you are pointing to alignment when how well the role matches the leader's internal wiring.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, to think of it in terms of what if the problem isn't your sensitivity? You're not too sensitive, you just are sensitive, right? That it's not sensitivity that's the problem, it's the systems that are designed without your brain in mind. That is the problem, and that can be fixed.
Definitely. From a brain and a nervous system perspective, why do some people need more time processing, recovery, or reflection, especially after difficult conversations?
Yeah, absolutely. So the research shows that folks who are on the higher end of sensory processing sensitivity, which to take a step back, I'll share that sensory processing sensitivity is a trait we all have. Otherwise, we wouldn't be, listening, say, to this episode, or watching it, or tasting the food that we eat, or taking in any amount of information, say the number of items on a desk, right? We can take in via our attention to detail, sensory input. We process emotions that maybe are spoken or not spoken just through the energy that is in a room or between two people. So all of us, right, as humans, are taking in sensory information via a trait, right, called sensory processing sensitivity. And those of us who are on the high end, the research actually shows that we have greater activation in our attention and empathy networks. So it'd be the person who notices when you shift something on the desk, right, or remove something, or notices a change in lighting in the room. But also, right on that empathy piece, they're noticing a change in sentiment, right, in the room. Can walk into a room and feel the tension without any words being spoken, right, because they have that empathy sensitivity. We have enhanced processing of emotional information. We have enhanced processing of social cues. Um, we have also, we're prone then because we're taking in more information, sensory information consciously, we can be prone to overstimulation. So the time that we need for processing that information is essential so that we actually can assess, right, all of this information that's coming in consciously and decide what to do with it. So it's because we're taking in more information than the majority of people that we need more time. But that time, right, is a benefit to anyone that's leveraging this information because we are going to be able to pick up again on the pattern in that information. We're going to be able to come up with a more creative or innovation solution to a problem because we have more information naturally coming in than the other 70% of the population. So that time is, yes, recovery time for taking in, right, what could be pretty intense, emotional information, say from a critical conversation. But it is also to leverage that intelligence because we're better at noticing subtleties that others are missing.
I I definitely agree with that, and that is so well said. And what I hear is that this isn't a flaw; it is a neurological reality. And when we ignore it, burnout becomes almost inevitable.
Yes, absolutely. And I am the perfect case for that, right? That I knew about this early. I've known about sensory processing sensitivity almost my entire life. I had the fortune of having a physician early on, letting my mom know. that there might be something sensory going on, then noticed some behavior in my earliest childhood. And then I discovered the book by Dr. Elaine Aron, The Highly Sensitive Person, in 2014. So more than right 10 years ago. And I was already in leadership roles. And while I believed everything that was in that book and knew again that I was a highly sensitive person, the pressure around me, the environments that I was in, and everything that I'd ever learned about leadership and how to lead and how to be effective and successful in organizations was telling me to lead as if I had someone else's nervous system as opposed to my own. And those messages are really strong. So I don't blame myself or anyone for getting into a burnout state. But what I am here to do now is to tell people it doesn't have to be that way, and that there is a lot of flexibility in our external systems, whether it be a partnership or a family unit or your community or your organization. Right, there are kind of reversible experiments, I call them, that you can try, right, so that you can test the system's flexibility and start to extend those boundaries, right, strengthen those boundaries and extend your autonomy so that you have agency in that system to tend to your nervous system in the way that you need to.
How does this mismatch usually show up in day to day life for sensitive neurodivergent leaders, especially in high pressure corporate environments?
Sure. Yeah. It shows up as the fatigue that you experience, and you don't have any type of trigger necessarily to point to as to why you're feeling so tired. It can be the emotional irritation you feel. And yet, again, there's nothing, say, in the day to day that you can specifically point to that would indicate like why you're feeling that. Um, the of course, even more extreme, like exhaustion that you might feel at the end of a week. And you might look back on it and still not be able to point exactly to this or that. Or, of course, you may be able to point to something specific, like a really intense conversation or set of conversations or the long hours that you're working, how you're not speaking up, right, about needs. Your needs aren't getting met at work, right? You're working in an environment that's designed, for someone else's nervous system, someone else's brain, and not your own. And I mention, the feelings, right, sensations, and just kind of like emotions that might come up for you without a direct tie to something, because it is typically, the small things that gradually build up over time, that account for the fatigue, exhaustion, and then ultimately like burnout that one might go through. It can be hard to notice what our signs of burnout are or signs of exhaustion are, when we haven't built the self awareness around our own nervous system and the signals our body sends. So it's very unique to each individual. Somebody, you might get into a hyper arousal state and your chest tightens and your heart flutters and your hands get a little sweaty, right? Like that may be a set of signs that are yours and that you need to learn to pay attention to those, that when those things are happening, you know to step away. Or you could get into a hypo arousal state, and that's where you start to feel tired, you start to withdraw, right, you're sleeping longer than usual. I've even, a sign of burnout could be that your eyelid flickers, right, and that is the stress signal that your body is sending. Stress can show up, right, can any number of ways, and they're unique to every individual. So it's very important that everyone become acutely aware of their own signs, and how it shows up for you in your day to day.
I completely agree with that. And it is an individual process, just like you said. But that constant self monitoring, trying to lead while suppressing your natural responses, creates a quiet but heavy form of exhaustion.
Yes, absolutely. That's it's a great way to put it. A quiet but heavy, yes, form of exhaustion. I think a lot of people would resonate with that.
Yeah. So, if someone listening right now realizes that this is me, where can they begin and what is one practical way to start leading authentically without losing credibility or authority?
Yes. So, one, I think it's important to just recognize that every type of system in your internal operating system that is every type exists for a reason, right? So whether you're highly sensitive or low sensitive or moderately sensitive, those are all just survival strategies that help the species. And really practicing that acceptance, right? So building awareness and accepting, right, your nervous system for the way that it is, knowing that it has evolved to be this way for a reason. Otherwise, it wouldn't persist in the species if it wasn't useful. It's just a matter of finding the right environment. Um, and of course, learning how to meet your own needs first and foremost. So, self leadership is essential, and self leadership is a set of skills, self awareness being one of them, self understanding, self compassion, but also self regulation, right? How do you meet your own needs with breath work, with body movement, articulating, what your needs are to others? So setting boundaries, and leadership skills can be learned. So you can absolutely learn how to lead in alignment with your nervous system, right? Your wiring is that starting point. um, but I think when people are learning to shift from the way they've been doing things and operating, from a place of assimilation, right, trying to lead like somebody else and trying to fit in, that learning what your needs are and how to very clearly articulate those needs in a way that can get those needs met at work is essential. And so reframing your needs from, say, like, when you tell a manager, right, or supervisor, "Well, I just need quiet to think." That doesn't help your manager understand the benefit to them, right? The benefit to the organization of why you need quiet time to think, or why, say, you need to work from home on occasion or all the time. And you can reframe that as, well, I actually do my most innovative thinking. I'm the most creative when I can process, right, information or data without interruption. Can I take some time for this? Or can I work from home on Wednesday to really put my best thinking to work on this project? That framing helps somebody else understand why, right, you're taking time to do a thing and why you're setting a boundary.
And the idea of designing system around your brain instead of forcing yourself into someone else's style feels deeply empowering.
I have found it to be so. I went through a period of, I call it agonizing reappraisal, when I hit burnout last year. And I made a decision to form my own business and to design a life around my sensitivity. And that's how North of Normal came to be, is that I now live a life and lead, right, a business that functions with my system and not against it. And I choose to take on clients who understand that and to work with them, right, on their goals. And I'm typically working with highly sensitive and neurodivergent leaders who are also learning how to lead in alignment with their nervous system. And so it is, not to say that I don't ever get overstimulated now or overwhelmed or tired, right? I'm building a business, but I have absolute control, right, over where I'm spending my time and how I am managing my nervous system. And so the flexibility and autonomy that I've been able to create with my own business is what has allowed me to tend to my very highly sensitive nervous system. And if I were ever to, enter into another system, I know exactly what to say and how to set a boundary up front, and continuously, so that other people, right, habitualize, right, their behavior around my behavior, right? Like people will only respect a boundary that exists, right? That they can, see or feel or hear. And we have a lot more control, and actually a lot more agency than we really give ourselves credit for, that we realize in our workplaces. And people are generally happy to oblige where there's a clear reason and a benefit, right, to them, or to the project, to the company. So just clearly articulating that is what I help people with now.
Yes, it definitely articulates with everything that you have said. I believe change rarely happens cleanly, like when leaders try to honor their brain but face pushback, like or slip back into old habits. What tends to help them stay grounded?
Absolutely, yes. One of the frameworks that I have that I work with folks on is align, and the G in align is grounding, which is all about self regulation. And what we develop there are one practices that can be used at any time to get the nervous system back into a grounded place, to keep executive functioning online, for better decision making and appropriate response during challenging times, or when a new way of working, say, is being challenged. That sometimes it's just a deep breath. Sometimes you can just close your eyes, right? Sometimes you actually are able to exit that situation and move your body physically, right, for a time. And there are reversible experiments that I help people create for themselves so that they can test these new boundaries that they're setting. So something small enough that isn't going to get them in trouble, right? That isn't going to, really startle the system, whether that's, their manager in that system, or in the organization as a whole. So we work on very easy to deploy self regulation techniques and practices that can be used anywhere, as well as, what can you do, say, when you're off work, right? Longer form self-regulation techniques. But I really like working with the simple, easy to deploy techniques, because when you're in a meeting, right, you're on a call, or you can't often take the five long inhales. You need to do something short. And sometimes that's physical movement that you can employ, and sometimes that's breath work. Sometimes, again, it's you could close your eyes and just decrease the amount of stimulation that's coming into your nervous system, because most of the sensory input does come in through the eyes. And so that's a big part of grounding and staying regulated while you're trying small reversible experiments. Again, something that if somebody gets upset by it, you can say, oops, okay, understand. Let's talk about a way of working that gets both of our needs met, right? And it doesn't rupture a relationship, right? Or break trust. We want to take small incremental steps towards the change that we're looking to create for ourselves. Change that anyone, including yourself, right, can get on board with.
So, Sarah, for any of our listeners who feel very resonated with this conversation and want to explore more about your work and learn more about from you, where can they find you?
Yeah. So really simple. You could just Google me, Sira Laurel, SIRALAUREL. I'm at www.siralaurel.com, and any number of social channels.
Wonderful. I will make sure to include all these details into the show notes. And listeners, if today's conversation resonated, I invite you to pause and notice what your mind and body are asking for, especially in how you lead. So you don't have to push through to be powerful. Sarah, thank you so much for spending this time with us on Inner Peace Better Health. And listeners, until next time, Take care of your mind because it shapes everything else.